there was so much that overwhelmed me when I purchased Phillips now 45 years ago, with the amount of industrialists and entrepreneurs that literally chose this place to live. I mean, I always used to liken it to Lake Forest, which had a lot of CEOs that were, head of companies that were nationally oriented, and Barrington seemed to be a choice of so many people that were more of first generation, explosions basically in their business. I opened my first store in Downers Grove when I graduated, and one of my customers was, and we were all in our early 20s at the time. One of my customers was Karen Hefflar, who lived in Oak Brook, Illinois.
Yes, I lived in Westchester, right next door.
Oh, okay. And she patronized us at the Downers Grove store. And she was an equestrian and boarded horses up here in Barrington. And she would come in and she would buy for her brother and her dad and her boyfriend of the month or year. And we would talk, and she'd go, there's a little store in this town I go through where I have my horses boarded in Barrington. And I didn't know much about Barrington. I think I'd heard of the name. That was about it. She goes, and it's very sleepy, and which sounds like a derogatory term as I tell this story now, but was a term that was used when a business wasn't up to the minute, or their market was older. And of course, at 22 years old, 23 years old, it's, you think you have all the answers. And she said, and I know that the guy that owns it must be, oh my goodness, 60, as I now am 70. And she said, you should go up and take a look at it. She goes, I'm actually going to open a women's wear store, which was called the Satin Philly.
Yes.
You remember that.
I do.
In the Commons. And, at the time, it was mid-70s. There were no economic problems. Business was a little bit easier, less competitive. Small sort of stores of this type were flourishing and profitable. And I just drove up one day and I introduced myself to Leo Phillips, the founder. There were two brothers that founded the store, which is a great little story in itself. But we just sort of hit it off, and he was looking to get out and retire. Excuse me. And I think it was April when I drove up, and on Memorial Day, I worked the store mid-May for 2 Saturdays. Saturdays in this business is enough to understand, sort of get a feeling for the business. I mean, you can watch the cash flow and know that it's going to be 60% of the week, and you could do the math backwards and say, he's doing, not only do I have bank statements to rely on, but also physically I can see he's doing the business. So we cut a deal, and I bought the store basically Memorial Day weekend in 1974. I think one of the hooks was we were in the Barrington Commons. The store was in the Barrington Commons when I bought it, which was already its third location. And we occupied where the post office satellite is in the Commons, that little corner. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's still out there where they took it out, but we had a couple of pine trees planted on the very vortex of the angle. And at the time, I know one of the customers who's again passed was Peter Nelson. And I can't think of the other customers, came up. on horses on Saturday. We had these double doors that were like every retailer likes to do when the weather's ideal. You swing them open so people are more likely to drift in. And the doors were open, and I was standing there working the store to see, and it was a Saturday. And there comes two horses. And I think I said to someone that had worked in the store at the time, I said, "Oh my gosh, these guys are on horses." And he looked at me it was actually Mark Grossi. Mark's dad was the groundskeeper at Barrington Hills Country Club. Huh. So they were born and raised here, or Mark was born and raised here. And he goes, "Well, yeah, people ride horses around here." And at the time, there was a path that you could get through around the high school, came in. There was actually a cut in Route 59 that was gravel. It was right by Esch Pharmacy. It was about 5 feet wide, and it went from sidewalk to sidewalk, west to east, or east to west, depending on which way you're riding. And that you could actually take this little gravel hyphen, if you will, in the road, and come over, and then they trotted up to Phillips and then lashed their horses to the pine tree that was out there. And I went, I've never seen anything like that. So that for me was like, well, this is going to be an experience. And it's one of the things that sort of, I think, started the interest in, well, who are these people I'm waiting on, and where they're coming from. But anyway, that's how I ended up in the store, and that's how I ended up coming to Barrington. And it wasn't too long after we purchased Phillips that Karen Hefflar from Oakbrook ended up opening the Satin Philly, which was a kitty corner from us across the parking lot. But that's how I ended up out here. I'm still here every day at 7:30 because this is still a charge for me.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
So very glad you are. Yes.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice.
So when you're not in the store, what do you like to do? I heard you have twin passions of photography and architecture, among other things.
I do. Thank you very much. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was in the Chicago Cultural Center shooting it. Huh. They are doing a privately funded, it's an anonymous donor. It's about a $40 million restoration of the GAR room, the Grand Army Room. Which was part of the 1897 build of the Chicago Public Library right on Michigan Avenue there. It is, of course, the library moved around with the Washington Library being new and built, and that was deeded to back to the city, I guess, as a cultural center and displays. So I'm a docent with the Frank Lloyd Wright Trust, also with the Chicago Architectural Foundation, and then I sit on the board of the Glessner House, which is on the south side of Chicago, which is the founder of International Harvester. Okay. And so that's the legacy of that house. And I have made great friends here and acquaintances that over the decades I've lived in the city now, I have managed to work my way into the tops of probably the last 10 tallest skyscrapers that we've built in Chicago, including the 1,200-foot mark of the Vista Tower, where I was harnessed in order to shoot, because it's that windy and that dangerous. But it's been thrilling. But I've also had great opportunities presented, like yesterday's only 80 feet in the air, getting into the ceiling of the Millet Dome, which is a glass artist on the original end of the library, then the south end of the library, which was an addition in 1903 or 1904, was where the Tiffany Dome is. Both of them extraordinary just extraordinary pieces of engineering just to hang the domes, the glass domes themselves. But this is on the north side of the building, and where Tiffany did the south dome. This north dome was done by an earlier glass artist. Tiffany existed in Chicago, but was not as well followed, was a new guy on the block, basically. So they are removing just so much of it, bringing back all the gold leaf, all the paint colors in the reliefs that are around the building, and then the rotunda, which encompasses the dome itself. Every piece of every panel of glass, which are over 300, that are about anywhere from 4 to 5 feet by 3 feet each, comprising the dome. In other words, of small panels. Each panel has hundreds of pieces of glass in it as well. Each of those are being taken out and then cleaned and restored, and caming the channel where the glass goes in art glass is going to be replaced. It is going to go back to a skylit dome. So many of these domes that were built in Chicago were done with a skylight over what you are looking at, the skylight. So you're looking at the colored dome glass, and you have natural light come down a light cord that illuminates it, basically. You have to remember, a lot of these ideas were just prior to being electrified as well. So artificial light wasn't part of the deal. So you wanted sunlight to come in and wash through these beautiful, color. And this dome is 59 feet. It's a little bit of an oval, so it's a fairly big engineering job in itself to hang all this glass at that height and that width, with no central supports to them. Everything has to be hung from the top, so they're restoring it. So Berglund, who actually lives here in Barrington, is a construction company that does a lot of historic work like this, and a preservation architect who is very well known in Chicago, Gunny Harbaugh, who's done just every significant building in the city, along with a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright's work, for instance, is on this project. And they're taking it down, cleaning it, refurbishing it, bringing back all the paint colors. So it's a great, it's a great project to be able to photograph. And I get a call occasionally like this one that is, would you like to archive this for me? And I go, yeah, of course I would.
Absolutely.
And so I get to crawl around the ceiling, and I will do this over the next year, once a week. And when they remove a lot of these panels, there's interesting things in back. Yesterday I was up above the dome. Today that skylight is covered with just like a standing seam roof of copper, but they will eventually, because the technology is advanced, be able to build a glass housing over the glass dome that will be weatherproof and drained, and will go back to the way it was intended to be seen. So I'm photographing not only the art of the entire vista, if you will, but also the nuts and the bolts that hold it together. So, so that's it's been my hobby and passion for several years. So I'm pretty involved with Frank Lloyd Wright. I don't sit on that particular trust board yet, but it is my desire to find some time to do that. Probably commercial architecture is what I really like to photograph, because it just has wider appeal. I think my interest is in more residential architecture, especially of that ilk that has changed, that has linkage in changing the way we look at, in this case, housing. In the way we look at what we brought over from Europe, what we practiced here for housing, like the Georgians and the Adams type of homes, to going into what Frank Lloyd Wright led us into, which is that mid-century modern explosion of 1950s changed homes, which we still see evolving today.
Fabulous, fabulous. Are there any other groups or charities that you support? As we know, Barrington is very strong in its commitment to service and volunteerism. And
well, we try. The one thing I kind of learned, and I don't think it's offended. I've never heard anyone out of the 6,500 contacts that we have be upset, but we try to cross market for a lot of these charities. In other words, I think we've accumulated this work over the years, that we have a database that's strong and accurate, and pretty influential in its own way. And that's not meant to be boastful, and it's not meant to be a comment on who we wait on, other than the fact that these are people that seem to want, like you or Bob or any of us, that want to see Barrington go forward and be a lifestyle in a community that has, true meaning. So I've never felt bad about leveraging that list to those that appear to need it, and benefit from it. So I think we maybe 10 or 15 years ago first got involved with Bob Lee's ALS connections through Les Turner, standing out on the corner on tag days in May, for instance. And it only took a couple of those tag days to realize that we could use more exposure for that to let people understand. So I think he was the first one we cross-marketed with, and then I eventually I had the privilege of riding with Bob Lee on his last segment from Vancouver down to San Diego, basically, or Mexico. From Canada to Mexico was the last leg of his 10-year sort of commitment to ride around the United States. And I think he raised very close to $1 million. I think it ended up just under $1 million on that. But that really inspired me, not because I did it, because I couldn't do it. And I walked my bike behind Bob and was hours behind him in arrival from place to place to place, from stopping point. He'd already showered, had dinner, showered, and was turned in by the time I was walking my bike into the parking lot to lock it up for the night. It was amazing to see him. I always say that when we would take off, he had several guys following, but they would be full-size beings in front of me on bicycles, and with all the switchbacks and being on the coast, about 2 hours into the ride, they were about half that size, and about 3 hours into the ride, they were about a quarter of the size. And then by the time lunch came, they were a speck on the horizon, and I was trying to keep up with them. I thought I trained, but my training on flat surfaces is just not like riding hills. It's just a completely different element. And I would watch Bob, would take off, and even though he might be a half a mile ahead or a mile ahead at the time, never get out of his seat. He would just pedal and pedal and pedal. And I would just go, how does anyone do this? But so that was an inspiration. So I think I came back wholeheartedly after that, and started to get behind A Ride for Three Reasons, Les Turner, helped Susan found Let It Be Us, which is the adoption awareness through DCFS. I'm an adopted dad. One of my 2 children was adopted. I was a foster parent. So all of that came together. I think we helped launch that extremely well. I think we leveraged our first 125,000 through the store in December. We had a wonderful time with Hope's Inn this year, which was the segment of Hope's Inn, which is, I think, one of the sisters who has done this Oso Bear. Oso is bear in Spanish. And she has these just wonderful stuffed bears that are for sale. They're done by the Guatemalan, in this case, women. I don't know that it's all women now. I think there may be some men in the organization, but they sew them basically, and then through trial and error found out the best thing to do is put the stuffing in the United States, and so they're sent up flat. And we sold them for the charity about 188 bears, but the most fun over the Christmas season, but the most fun was the bear hunt we had, the treasure hunt, where we had 14 merchants in town buy a bear and then place it somewhere in the store on the day of the treasure hunt, which was December 12th this year. The kids would run around and they would look around, they'd find the bear, and then when they found it, the merchant would give them a sticker to put on this treasure map. Mm-hmm. And so we had another 88 bears sold that Saturday. So it was, it was fun. So, and that's a very inspiring charity in itself, and the fact that it sort of grew out of this incubator program at the Barrington High School.
And it's marvelous you have that platform through your store.
Yep.
And all your
Yes,
contacts.
It is. Yeah, I agree.
So having been here for 45 years, 7 years?
Correct.
What changes have you seen in Barrington besides horses probably not riding into the store anymore?
Well, that's something I miss, and it's too bad we can't do that. Changes on the positive side have been things like the White House, like the philanthropic. I think I've watched this philanthropy grow in Barrington over 40 years. I can go back and say there was just nothing either public or maybe it's social media that sort of pushed it so much, but seeing that grow along with even like Bob Lee's now his volunteer group that he's doing.
I understand you and George Reed are planning a book on Barrington families.
It also occurred to me, having worked in the community for this long, that there are a lot of families that are just passing. I don't know what other word to use, but just passing away. And there just are so many people that just, like the passing, I said recently, of Dick Pepper.
Yes.
Another incredible family that, the community is small, it's important, it's rich in not only social history, but business history, that I keep getting this sort of tap on the, back of my shoulder that says, you guys, somebody should start writing something about before it just, sort of passes away and it's lost. And so that's what happened when Bob came in the other day. It sort of renewed that idea. And I had also talked to Glenn, and he's actually returning about the 10th of March from their winter house. And he retired this year, and he said, that's something I'd still like to work on. And I don't think I have a desire to write, but I certainly have a desire to collect a lot of this history. So that's how we ended up, beginning to talk about this again.
Well, that is fabulous. As that's part of my job, local history and genealogy. I would find that absolutely invaluable for our community as well, and so would the library.
So, all right, Kate. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, it was very productive for me. Thanks.
All right, very good. Bye now.
Bye-bye.